Hello everybody, welcome to the Spring Boot course with REST API, MVC and microservices. This course is a very beginner friendly course. The learners can actually do practice with me while I go through these videos. So let's now understand what is the course agenda for this. For this Spring Boot course with REST API, MVC and microservices, I have actually made the divisions like this. So firstly, introduction to the Spring Boot. And as part of the Spring Boot, we are going to learn the overview of Spring Boot. What is Spring Boot? What is Spring? And how Spring Boot helps to develop applications fastly. How we can actually minimize the configurations. Those all details we are going to discuss as part of the overview. And we will understand the environment setup. What tools you require, what softwares need to be installed, what servers are required to run your applications. So all those details we are going to understand as part of the environment setup. And then setting up of a Spring Boot project. So how we can actually start a Spring Boot project. So we'll understand what is Spring Initializer and what are different ways to create your Spring Boot project fastly and how we can actually run fastly. And we also see the details of the project structure and configuration details, what is called pom.xml. And since we use the Maven as the build tool for this project management tool, we will understand some details of the Maven. And we also understand Spring Actuator and what is the use of it and how we can actually monitor the health of our application with Spring Actuator. So these details will be as part of introduction. Once this is done, and we straight away build RESTful APIs with Spring Boot, we will understand what is a RESTful web service, what is a REST API, okay, what are RESTful services. So all are same actually. We will understand clearly what is a service and how it is a RESTful service and what are best practices and what are the principles which we have to follow to create any RESTful service. And we will create a simple RESTful API with certain services written and how to expose those services with the endpoints and how we are going to access those endpoints with client tools like Postman. And then we will also understand different HTTP methods, HTTP, get, post, put, and delete methods, and how we can actually get data through web browser. A browser, of course, is a client. And in order to do with post, put, and delete, how I can actually make use of a client tool, a REST client that is Postman. So we are going to discuss about the Postman as well, and we are going to access the services with the known endpoints. And we also see how the binding happens from JSON to your Java object and vice versa. And we'll understand these formats, JSON and XML formats, and which are all related to RESTful API. And after that, we are going to understand a Spring MVC. So how we are going to create a Spring MVC applications in Spring Boot. We'll understand what is model view controller, MVC pattern, how that model class is going to get injected automatically in Spring. And we are going to write controllers and we will handle different requests using the controllers. We will write as many controllers as possible based on the requirements. And then for view, we are going to use Thymeleaf template engine. Spring Boot by default recommends Thymeleaf. And we also see how the request mapping will be done, how the parameters should be handled, which we actually get from the HTML pages, how form binding will happen. And we will also discuss um, different form controls, text boxes, radio boxes, check boxes, drop down boxes, etc. And how do we handle all the data which is coming through these form widgets. And I also introduce Lombok framework. It's a bean management framework, and what are its benefits and how it actually makes your applications so simple and crisp. So that we are going to discuss as part of this Lombok. And once this is done, and we will access the database from your Spring Boot application. So how to access data? And for that, we are going to use JPA. And JPA Java Persistence API. And here we are going to use Hibernate. Of course, you have some other implementations for JPA, but we are going to use Hibernate. And we'll see what is the use of this JPA, how ORM, object relational mapping, will happen. That means how the classes and tables are mapped, and integrating JPA with the Spring Boot, and what are the starters which we are required to add to our application. So starter dependencies we say, and what dependency you require to use with the JPA. And we see how we can actually write entity classes. So entity class is a class that actually map to your database table, and how to mention relationship among the entity classes. And we understand repository pattern, and we use CRUD operations which are provided by the repositories. So we'll use JPA repository, which by default will provide us the free CRUD operations which we can actually use in our application. So this JPA we will use with RESTful web services, and we also use that as part of MVC also. And once this is done, and we are going to learn about security. So how to secure your endpoints whenever you're using the RESTful API, and how to secure your application, your MVC application also. The security we'll be seeing for both RESTful API as well as Spring MVC applications. As part of security, we need to discuss what is authentication, what is authorization, and how we can actually secure our application simply by using Spring Security, what starter dependencies you need to have, and implementing authentication and authorization. What are different authentication mechanisms, in-memory authentication, and database specific authentication, and authorization, role-based access control. So how you can actually define the roles, and later how you can actually specify which role has the privilege on what. So these all details we are going to discuss as part of the security with respect to both the RESTful applications as well as the MVC application. And of course, we are going to discuss about microservices. So how we can actually create microservices with Spring Boot. We'll understand what are different architectures, monolithic architecture and microservice architecture, and why we need microservices. And we will create microservices with Spring Boot. We will run the microservices and by deploying in different servers. And this is all going to be the course agenda. And as I said, this course is going to be a very beginner friendly course. The learners can actually practice along with me. It will be simple and it will be to the point. And we will be starting with the next video how we are actually going to dwell with this particular Spring Boot application. Thank you. Stay tuned. Take care.